The Galactic Council chamber was abuzz with disbelief. The announcement that humans had extended a dinner invitation to the apex predators of the galaxy, species long feared and respected for their dominance, shook the room. These predators, known collectively as the Zactyr, were renowned for their ruthless efficiency in hunting and their strictly carnivorous diet. For centuries, they had been regarded as the galaxy's most formidable beings, and the idea of humans hosting them for a diplomatic feast was both audacious and bewildering. Captain Elena Marquez, the human representative, stood confidently at the podium. Her calm demeanor belied the murmurs of skepticism from other species present. "We believe that understanding begins at the dinner table," she declared, her voice firm yet inviting. "This event isn't just about diplomacy. It's about redefining our relationships with the Zactyr." The Zactyr were led by Warlord Katal, a towering figure with gleaming, obsidian scales and eyes that seemed to pierce through one's soul. His kind had never been approached with such a gesture, and he found the invitation intriguing. He leaned back in his council seat, his taloned fingers tapping rhythmically on the armrest. "Humans," he growled during the session, "are either incredibly brave or foolish. Perhaps both." The council's reaction was mixed. Representatives from other species voiced their doubts. "Humans do not understand what they are inviting," a reptilian ambassador hissed. "The Zactyr are not creatures to be tamed with pleasantries." Others were more curious, seeing the move as bold but potentially groundbreaking. If humans could bridge the gap with the galaxy's most feared predators, what else might they achieve? Despite the skepticism, preparations for the dinner began in earnest. The chosen venue was Earth, a decision that carried symbolic weight. Humanity's homeworld, with its diverse ecosystems and rich culinary heritage, was an ideal stage to showcase their hospitality. For weeks, chefs, diplomats, and cultural experts worked tirelessly, researching the dietary needs and preferences of the Zactyr while curating a menu that celebrated Earth's culinary diversity. As the event drew nearer, excitement and tension mounted. News of the dinner spread like wildfire, with media outlets from across the galaxy speculating on its outcome. Some labeled it a suicidal endeavor, while others saw it as a daring step toward a new era of diplomacy. On Earth, the mood was a mix of pride and apprehension. This was a chance to prove humanity's mettle on the intergalactic stage, but the margin for error was slim. The Zactyr, for their part, were intrigued but cautious. Warlord Katal convened with his inner circle to discuss the invitation. "Humans have always been unpredictable," one advisor remarked. "This could be a trap." Katal's lips curled into a predatory smile. "Perhaps, but it is a trap I am willing to spring. Their audacity deserves an answer." When the day of the dinner arrived, the atmosphere on Earth was electric. The venue, a grand hall in New Eden, Earth's intergalactic embassy, had been transformed into a spectacle of diplomacy and culinary artistry. Long tables were adorned with intricate floral arrangements and luminescent orbs that bathed the room in a soft, otherworldly glow. The centerpiece was a massive banquet table laden with dishes representing Earth's culinary diversity, from roasted venison to spiced alien tubers. Warlord Katal and his entourage arrived with a retinue of Zactyr warriors, their imposing presence filling the room with a palpable tension. The humans, led by Elena, greeted them with practiced composure. Katal's golden eyes swept over the hall, taking in the humans' apparent calm. "You have no fear of us," he observed, his voice a low rumble that carried across the room. "We understand the risks," Elena replied with a calm smile, "but fear has never been humanity's defining trait." As the guests took their seats, the weight of the moment was undeniable. The Zactyr, long accustomed to being regarded with fear and reverence, now sat as honored guests at a human table. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. This was more than a meal. It was a test of humanity's courage, ingenuity, and ability to forge connections in the most unlikely circumstances. The dinner began with an exchange of toasts. Human wine, a deep red Merlot, was served alongside Zactyr bloodroot extract, a potent beverage revered by their kind. Elena raised her glass, her voice steady as she addressed the room, to understanding and new beginnings. May this night mark the first step toward a future of cooperation and mutual respect. Kotal lifted his own glass, his sharp claws glinting in the light. To humans, he said, his tone equal parts admiration and challenge. May your bravery match your ambition. With that, the feast began. The first course, a selection of Earth's finest seafood, was met with cautious curiosity by the Zaktir. Chefs had gone to great lengths to adapt the dishes to their carnivorous preferences, ensuring that every bite was both palatable and respectful of their dietary needs. The Zaktir's reactions ranged from surprise to approval, their usually stoic expressions betraying flickers of appreciation. Conversations flowed cautiously at first, with both sides testing the waters. One human diplomat, emboldened by the atmosphere, dared to ask Kotal about Zaktir hunting rituals. The question hung in the air for a moment, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, to everyone's surprise, Kotal began to speak. Hunting is not merely survival for us, he said, his deep voice commanding attention. It is an art, a test of skill and strategy. Each hunt is a story, a lesson passed down through generations. As he spoke, the humans listened intently, their initial fear giving way to genuine curiosity. Kotal's tales of great hunts, of battles against prey that pushed even the Zaktir to their limits, painted a vivid picture of a culture deeply rooted in tradition and honor. For their part, the humans shared stories of their own. Elena recounted humanity's evolution as hunters, from the early days of stone tools to the modern era of innovation. We may not have your claws or strength, she said, but we understand the hunt. It's a part of who we are. As the evening wore on, the initial wariness began to dissipate. Laughter echoed through the hall, mingling with the clinking of glasses and the soft hum of conversation. The Zaktir, who had entered the room as aloof predators, now engaged with their human hosts on equal footing. And for the first time, they began to see humanity not as clever prey but as kindred spirits, a species defined by resilience, adaptability, and an unyielding spirit. The conversations deepened as the second course was served, prime cuts of earth-raised bison, slow roasted to perfection, paired with exotic side dishes that mimicked the textures and flavors of Zaktir cuisine. The room, filled with the tantalizing aroma of spices and seared meat, buzzed with a sense of cautious camaraderie. Yet beneath the surface of jovial exchanges and shared laughter lay the unspoken question that loomed over the dinner. Why had the humans extended this invitation in the first place? Kotal, ever the strategist, studied his human host as intently as he savored the feast. His kind were natural skeptics, conditioned to see ulterior motives behind every gesture of goodwill. He leaned toward Elena, who sat across from him, and spoke in a tone that was both conversational and probing. You humans are an enigma. You know our reputation, yet here we are. What do you truly hope to gain from this? Elena set down her fork, meeting Kotal's gaze without flinching. Understanding, she said simply. For centuries, fear has defined how the galaxy views the Zaktir. We want to change that narrative. Kotal raised an eyebrow, intrigued but unconvinced. Fear is a tool, Captain. It has kept us alive, ensured our dominance. Why would you wish to strip us of it? Elena's smile was tinged with sympathy. Because fear isolates. It creates walls where bridges could stand. Humanity has learned that lesson the hard way. The table fell silent as her words hung in the air. The Zaktir warriors exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Kotal's talons tapped against his glass in a rhythmic pattern as he considered her response. And what do you propose to build these bridges? Stories? Friendship? His voice carried a note of skepticism, but there was no denying the curiosity in his eyes. Something more enduring, Elena replied. She gestured around the room. This dinner is just the beginning. Imagine what we could achieve if we combined our strengths, your discipline and power, our innovation and adaptability. Together, We could face challenges no single species could overcome. Her words struck a chord, though Cattell was careful not to show it. The idea of collaboration was foreign to the Zactier, who had always thrived on their independence. Yet, he could not deny the logic in her argument. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, and even the apex predators were not invincible. The evening continued with a surprising ease, the initial tension giving way to a genuine exchange of ideas. The Zactiers shared more about their culture, revealing layers of complexity that few outsiders had ever glimpsed. They spoke of their reverence for the hunt, not merely as a means of survival, but as a sacred tradition that bonded their communities and honored their ancestors. Each hunt was a rite of passage, a test of courage and skill that shaped their identity. The humans, in turn, shared stories of their own struggles and triumphs. Elena recounted humanity's journey from a fragile, fledgling species to one that had reached the stars. She spoke of wars that had tested their resilience, discoveries that had expanded their horizons, and moments of unity that had defined their greatest achievements. For the first time, the Zactiers saw humanity not as opportunistic upstarts, but as kindred spirits, a species that, like them, had faced adversity and emerged stronger for it. One of Cattell's advisors, a fierce warrior named Trek, voiced a question that had been on the minds of many. Your stories are impressive, but tell us this. How do you reconcile your desire for peace with your capacity for violence? We have heard tales of human wars that rival even our own in brutality. Elena nodded, acknowledging the truth in Trek's words. It's a paradox we grapple with every day. Our capacity for destruction is matched only by our capacity for creation. We've learned to channel that duality into progress, though the journey hasn't been easy. Cattell listened intently, his golden eyes narrowing as he weighed her words. He had always respected strength, and there was no denying that humanity possessed it in abundance. But what intrigued him more was their ability to wield it with purpose, to turn their struggles into stepping stones for growth. As the final course was served, a dessert of spice fruit compote paired with a rich, alien-inspired chocolate, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. What had begun as a tense, high-stakes encounter had evolved into something far more profound. The humans and Zactier, once separated by fear and misunderstanding, now found themselves on the brink of something extraordinary, mutual respect. But beneath the surface, Cattell's mind was still churning. The humans had proven themselves resourceful and persuasive, but questions remained. Could they be trusted? Were their intentions as noble as they seemed, or was this dinner merely a prelude to a larger game? And most importantly, what did the Zactier stand to gain or lose by accepting their outstretched hand? As the evening drew to a close, Elena rose to address the room. Her voice carried the weight of the moment, her words carefully chosen to leave a lasting impression. Tonight, we have taken the first step towards something greater than ourselves. Let this be a reminder that even the most unlikely of alliances can be forged when we choose courage over fear. Cattell stood as well, his imposing figure commanding the attention of everyone present. He regarded Elena with a mixture of admiration and caution. You have given us much to consider, Captain. Your words are bold, and your actions bolder still. We will see if they are matched by your resolve. With that, the Zactier rose from their seats, their departure as commanding as their arrival. The humans watched them go, their hearts pounding with a mix of hope and uncertainty. The dinner had been a success, but the real challenge lay ahead. Would the seeds planted that night take root, or would they be swept away by the tides of history? As Elena stood in the empty hall, she couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment tempered by the weight of what was to come. The Zactier were no longer just apex predators in her eyes. They were potential allies, equals, and perhaps even friends. But the road to that future would not be easy. Unbeknownst to her, Cattell shared a similar sentiment as he boarded his ship. The humans had surprised him, defying every expectation. They were bold, unpredictable, and undeniably intriguing. For the first time in centuries, the Zaktir warlord found himself contemplating a future that was not defined by conquest, but by collaboration. And so, as the stars stretched out before them, both humans and Zaktir carried the weight of the evening's promise, a fragile hope that the galaxy's fiercest predators and its most ambitious dreamers could find common ground. The dinner continued, but now the dynamics had shifted. Warlord Katal and his warriors were no longer merely passive observers of human hospitality. They were actively engaging, sharing stories, and even asking questions of their human hosts. The transformation was subtle but profound, and for Katal, the evening had taken on a significance he hadn't anticipated. Katal leaned back in his chair, the alien equivalent of satisfaction visible in his posture. His golden eyes scanned the room, taking in the sight of his warriors exchanging words with humans. For centuries, the Zaktir had been the apex predators of the galaxy, feared and respected by all. Yet here at this human table, they were being treated not as hunters or killers, but as equals. It was disarming, even humbling. Turning to his second-in-command, a fierce warrior named Viren, Katal spoke in a low growl. "What do you make of them?" Viren tilted her head, her sleek black scales catching the light. "They are bold, warlord. To invite us here, to share their table, it is an act of courage, or madness." Katal allowed himself a rare chuckle. "Perhaps both, but there is more to it than that. These humans, they do not fear us in the way others do. They see us not as monsters, but as something more." Viren's eyes narrowed. "Do you trust them?" "No," Katal replied immediately. "Trust is earned, not given. But I respect them, and that is a foundation we can build upon." As the evening progressed, the humans began to delve deeper into their conversations with the Zaktir. Elena Marquez, ever the diplomat, had strategically seated herself near Katal, ensuring she could steer the dialogue in meaningful directions. She noticed that Katal, despite his imposing presence, was a thoughtful listener. He didn't interrupt or dismiss. He considered every word spoken to him. "Warlord Katal," Elena began, her tone measured. "May I ask you something personal?" Katal's golden eyes fixed on her, unblinking. "You may. What drives the Zaktir? You've spoken of honor and tradition, of the hunt as an art form. But what lies at the heart of your people? What do you seek beyond survival?" The room seemed to quiet as Katal pondered her question. When he spoke, his voice was deep and deliberate. "We seek to prove ourselves," he said, "to test our limits, to grow stronger with each challenge. The hunt is our way of understanding the universe. Each prey we face teaches us something about them and about ourselves." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "In that sense, we're not so different. Humans, too, have always sought to test our limits. But for us, the ultimate challenge has been understanding others. We've learned that true strength lies not just in overcoming adversaries, but in finding common ground with them." Katal regarded her with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Common ground is a luxury, Captain, one that is not always possible." "Perhaps," Elena conceded, "but isn't it worth striving for?" Before Katal could respond, a human scientist seated nearby chimed in. "If I may," he began hesitantly, "I've studied predator-prey dynamics on Earth for years. One of the most fascinating discoveries we've made is that cooperation often leads to greater survival than competition. Even apex predators, like wolves, thrive because they work together. Could it not be the same for intergalactic species?" Katal turned his piercing gaze on the scientist, who swallowed nervously but held his ground. "You suggest," Katal said slowly, "that the Zaktir should abandon our ways? That we should trade the hunt for cooperation, not abandon," the scientist clarified quickly. "Evolve, adapt. Predators don't lose their strength by learning to collaborate. They gain new tools for survival." Katal leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the table. "And what would you have us do, human? Form alliances with our prey? Share meals instead of claiming them. The scientist faltered, unsure how to respond. But Elena stepped in, her voice calm and steady. No one is asking you to forsake your identity, warlord. What we're suggesting is that there's strength in diversity. By understanding others, by forming connections, you gain not just allies but insights that make you stronger. Katel's eyes narrowed. He was silent for a long moment, his mind clearly racing. Then, to everyone's surprise, he leaned back and let out a low, rumbling laugh. You humans, he said, shaking his head, always seeking to turn enemies into friends. It is admirable. Naive, perhaps, but admirable. The tension in the room eased as laughter rippled through the crowd. Even Vierin allowed herself a faint smile. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, with humans and Zaktir sharing anecdotes about their respective worlds. The Zaktir, known for their stoic demeanor, began to relax, their sharp-edged formalities softening as they opened up about their traditions and experiences. One of the younger Zaktir warriors, a lithe and curious individual named Tarok, spoke about his first hunt. It was a Draven beast, he said, his voice tinged with pride. 7 meters tall, with claws like daggers. It took my entire clan to bring it down. But the lesson I learned that day was not about strength. It was about strategy. We succeeded not because we were the strongest, but because we worked together. The humans listened intently, their expressions a mix of awe and respect. Tarok's story resonated with them, mirroring their own tales of teamwork and perseverance. As the night wore on, the initial barriers between the two species continued to dissolve. The Zaktir, who had entered the hall as aloof predators, now seemed almost approachable. For Katel, this realization was both unsettling and intriguing. He had always viewed humans as clever but fragile, a species defined by their ingenuity rather than their strength. But now, he saw them in a new light. They were resilient, resourceful, and unafraid to face even the most daunting challenges. Elena, sensing an opportunity, decided to broach a sensitive topic. Warlord Katel, she began cautiously. May I ask about the conflict on Vector 7? Our reports indicate that Zaktir forces have been engaged there for years. Perhaps we could help. Katel's expression hardened. The conflict on Vector 7 is our affair, Captain. It is a test of our strength, a proving ground for our warriors. We do not require your interference. I understand, Elena replied, her tone respectful. But consider this. If the goal is to test your limits, wouldn't a partnership with us offer an even greater challenge? Imagine what we could achieve together. Humans and Zaktir, combining our strengths. Katel stared at her, his golden eyes unblinking. For a moment, it seemed as though he might dismiss her outright. But then, slowly, he nodded. You are bold, Captain. Boldness is a trait I respect. I will consider your words. It was a small victory, but a significant one. For the first time, the possibility of collaboration between humans and Zaktir was on the table. And though the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, both species had taken the first step toward a future that, just days ago, had seemed impossible. As the dinner drew to a close, Katel rose from his seat, towering over the assembled crowd. He raised his glass, his voice resonating through the hall. To humanity, he said, his tone filled with a mix of respect and curiosity. May your courage continue to surprise us. The aftermath of the dinner was a mix of exhilaration and cautious optimism. Both humans and Zaktir had stepped out of their comfort zones, engaging in an interaction that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. As the Zaktir delegation prepared to return to their flagship orbiting Earth, Warlord Katel called for a final meeting with Captain Elena Marquez and the human delegation. The meeting took place in a private chamber of the New Eden Embassy. It was a room designed for diplomacy, with circular seating arrangements to signify equality, and a massive holographic projection of the galaxy spinning slowly above the table. Katel, his massive frame dwarfing the humans, stood at the head of his delegation. His golden eyes were sharp but not hostile, a marked change from the predatory gaze that had greeted them upon his arrival. "We leave soon," Cattell began, his voice low and deliberate. "But before we do, there is a matter to discuss. Your words, Captain Marquez, have lingered with me. You spoke of strength through understanding, of the hunt not as a conflict, but as a shared endeavor. It is an intriguing perspective." Elena inclined her head. "I'm glad our words resonated with you, Warlord. Humanity believes that strength is not diminished by cooperation, but amplified. Together, we could face challenges that neither of us could overcome alone." Cattell's claws clicked against the table as he considered her words. "Your people have shown courage. You invited predators into your home, knowing the risks. That is not the action of prey. It is the action of equals." However, he paused, his gaze sweeping over the human delegation. "Words alone do not build alliances. We Zaktir value deeds above all." Elena exchanged a glance with her team before responding. "What kind of deeds, Warlord?" Cattell's lips curled into a predatory smile. "A test. If humans wish to stand alongside the Zaktir, they must prove their worth. Not with words or gestures, but with action." "What kind of test?" one of the human diplomats asked cautiously. Cattell leaned forward, his golden eyes glinting. "There is a creature on Vector 7, a beast that has eluded even our most skilled hunters. It is a terror of the wilds, a predator that embodies the chaos of nature. If humans wish to demonstrate their strength, they will join us in the hunt." The room fell silent. The Zaktir's test was both a challenge and a gamble. A failure would shatter the progress made during the dinner, reducing humanity to mere prey in their eyes. But a success could solidify an unprecedented alliance. Elena broke the silence. "We accept." The Zaktir delegation exchanged approving glances, their respect for the humans growing. Cattell nodded. "Then it is settled. Prepare yourselves, humans. We depart for Vector 7 at first light." The journey to Vector 7 was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. The humans, led by Elena, boarded the Zaktir warship, a sleek, obsidian craft bristling with weaponry. The ship's interior was stark and utilitarian, designed for function rather than comfort. As the humans settled into their quarters, they couldn't help but marvel at the Zaktir's efficiency and discipline. Cattell himself came to brief them before arrival. The holographic image of the Vector 7 beast loomed large above the table, its jagged claws and serrated fangs casting ominous shadows. "This is the Crithian stalker," Cattell explained. "It is not merely a predator. It is a force of nature. It hunts in silence, strikes without warning, and leaves no trace. Many of our kind have fallen to it. We'll need to adapt," Elena said, her tone resolute. "Human ingenuity will be our weapon." Cattell's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Then let us see if your ingenuity matches your bravery." The surface of Vector 7 was a stark contrast to the polished interiors of the warship. Towering trees with jagged, metallic leaves loomed over the hunting party, casting long shadows in the dim light of the planet's distant sun. The air was thick with humidity, carrying the scent of decay and the distant calls of alien wildlife. Every step felt like an intrusion into a world that was alive and hostile. The Zaktir moved with practiced ease, their predatory instincts honed over generations. The humans, though less physically imposing, carried an array of advanced equipment: sensor drones, energy rifles, and adaptive camouflage suits. Elena and her team knew they couldn't match the Zaktir's raw strength, but they had technology and strategy on their side. The hunt began with methodical precision. The Zaktir scouts fanned out, their movements silent and deliberate. The humans deployed drones to map the terrain and detect heat signatures. It wasn't long before they found their first clue: a massive claw mark etched into the trunk of a tree, its edges still fresh. "This way," Cattell growled, his voice low but commanding. The hunting party pressed on, their senses heightened. Hours passed, the tension growing with each step. The forest seemed to close in around them, the shadows deepening. Then, without warning, The Crithian stalker struck. It was a blur of motion, a flash of silver and black as the creature burst from the underbrush. Its eyes glowed with an eerie luminescence, and its roar reverberated through the trees. The humans and Zactyr scattered, their training kicking in as they dodged its initial strike. The creature was every bit as formidable as Cattell had described. Its movements were fluid and calculated, its claws slicing through tree trunks as if they were paper. The Zactyr warriors launched their attacks, their energy blades flashing in the dim light, but the beast's hide absorbed the blows with little effect. Elena's mind raced as she assessed the situation. "We need to find a weakness," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. One of the human scientists, huddled behind a boulder, activated a scanning drone. The device zipped through the air, analyzing the creature as it fought. "Its underbelly," the scientist called out. "The hide there is thinner." Cattell heard the shout and roared an order to his warriors. "Drive it onto its back." The battle intensified. The humans used their drones to distract the beast, forcing it to divide its attention. The Zactyr warriors coordinated their strikes, driving the creature toward a narrow ravine. Elena, seeing an opening, grabbed an energy rifle and fired at the ground beneath the stalker's feet, destabilizing the terrain. With a deafening roar, the Crithian stalker lost its footing and tumbled into the ravine. The Zactyr and humans moved quickly, launching a coordinated assault on its exposed underbelly. Energy blasts and blade strikes found their mark, and the beast let out one final, ear-splitting cry before collapsing. The forest fell silent. Cattell approached the fallen creature, his expression unreadable. He turned to Elena, his golden eyes locking with hers. "You fought well, humans. Together, we achieved what neither of us could have done alone." Elena nodded, her chest heaving from the exertion. "It was a team effort, Warlord. Just as it should be." Back on the Zactyr warship, the atmosphere was one of quiet triumph. The humans and Zactyr shared a rare moment of camaraderie, their mutual respect solidified by the hunt. Cattell addressed Elena one last time before they parted ways. "You have proven your worth, Captain," he said. "The Zactyr recognize humanity not as prey, but as allies. Let this be the first of many hunts.